This business podcast, the Two Business Guys Mastermind, uncovers for you secrets and share tips and tricks to entrepreneurship as they mastermind on how to have startup, operational, and overall business success so that you can go on to get better results. Enjoy. It's true you can't run your business on grants and loans. Listen in as the Two Business Guys Mastermind, more like Argue Mind, on the reasons why. Enjoy. So guys, you get a chance to hear the Two Business Guys, not mastermind, but argue mind, right? Because we are at an impasse on how companies should be financing their businesses. Now, we know that this is a pandemic, so some of the things you're going to hear, I don't mind winning or losing this position, but I just have a position that I think is a little more solid, right? So when John earlier this week said, hey, you should apply for these loans for your business. And I says, no, I'd rather finance my business through the best means possible, and that is customer financing. He's like, yeah, customer financing? What does that mean? Well, through sales. Now, I want to share my position with you guys, right? First of all, before we get started, hey, we appreciate you coming on in. Listen, we love you guys coming in, listening to us every week. Smash the like button, give us a thumbs up if this particular episode was one that worked for you, right? We would appreciate hearing it in your comments, telling your friends, sharing the video. And if you're hearing this, just a visual, or if you're not watching it on YouTube, then subscribe to our channel. We certainly would appreciate it. But I'm telling you guys, I think the best way, your customers are the financiers of your business. Plain and simple. If you have proven that you have a business model that works, then it is my personal belief that the health of your business, now this is the key here, guys, is that the health of your business is going to be determined by whether or not they're buying. It's also going to show whether or not you got any sales chops, any marketing chops. This is how I said it to John. I says, no, I don't want anything muddying my statement of cash flows waters. And I could just imagine John was over there going, that either that guy is hard-headed, and he's going to end up with a cash flow crunch, or he's just not running good business. But it's just my personal belief. And the kind of businesses I like to create, digital businesses that don't have, the additional marginal cost. I remember that's one thing I got from college, right? Additional marginal cost. Create digital companies that you don't have additional marginal costs. And I said, what would do that? Well, I create typically digital businesses, right? So, but not everybody's in my position, right? So John and I are going to argue this point for the benefit of you guys. Why you should either customer finance it or you should have some other types of cash flow in your business. John, you could take the floor, sir. Why should companies go out and get the grants? Go out and take the loans.
Absolutely. Now, first, I want to state that ideally, yes, a business should be producing its own revenue, and that revenue should be going back into the business to grow the business and sustain it. But there are issues with that alone. We're dealing with one right now with the economic crisis.
Right.
If I'm a restaurant owner and my sales have dramatically decreased because I'm not able to open up my dining room, or I have limited, I can only do a 20% capacity or 50% capacity of the dining room. So then how do you keep the rent paid? How do you keep your employees paid? How do you pay your insurance? those are some of the things that we look at. Ideally, yes, in good economic times, when a business is strong, absolutely. And that's why it's important to set aside an emergency account as well.
Absolutely.
And
And
I,
I would argue for that. I would
yep,
definitely argue to have from operations. Now, guys, you can, I understand, like to John's point, like I said, I don't mind losing this one simply because the pandemic just did some tremendous things. I'm sorry, John, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I can understand your points. And we just want to share this with you guys that obviously, yes, your business should live or die, by its own bootstrap, right? But we know unusual times, unusual times, right? So we're going to just kind of go point by point. So you got capacity, right? So how do you maintain your capacity? How do you pay your insurances? How do you finance operations? Is that one of the other ones to your point, John?
absolutely. Operations is huge. So whether that's payroll, and even companies that are in healthy positions, let's say you're a construction company and you're not getting paid for 60 days. So the time of the project and then 60 days after the project, you're not receiving the proceeds. Well, you're paying for materials, you're paying for employee
Yes.
staffing, you're paying for insurance, and you still don't know whether or not that customer is going to pay on time. So I can tell you, someone who had a successful multi-million dollar construction company in the pipeline industry, that there were weeks. I mean, our payroll was $50,000 a week roughly, and there were weeks where we didn't get the money that was owed to us. So it was late by a couple weeks. So we were in a little bit of a crunch where we had to rely on a line of credit for those types of things, or materials for a job um, that we might not get paid uh, for 6 months on. So those types of things, um, I think we have to look at under different circumstances, and even what we're dealing with today in this economic environment is a different circumstance than the ideal business situation. I truly believe that a business should invest into itself and grow organically as much as it can. Here is the caveat to that. I could tell you personally, as a poor kid growing up, my dad was a janitor, my mom was a factory worker. If my brother and I wouldn't have received some of the loans that we received, the opportunities that we capitalized on would have been unavailable to us because we didn't have the reserves naturally. I mean, we didn't have trust funds or anything like that to go back onto. So when you're looking at the market, when you're looking at expanding your business physically, whether that's real estate or purchasing equipment, I mean, one of our drills was $800,000. I mean, and we had five drills. Um, and so we wouldn't have been able to do that by pulling ourselves up from the bootstraps. It would have taken us lifetimes to save that amount of money to be able to start that business and grow it as rapidly as we did.
Good
And
point.
so so I look at it from that standpoint as well. It's fine and well for individuals that do have the resources, but I believe that opportunities exist for all of us to capitalize on. And for someone who came up, with limited funds and networks and whatnot, we relied on that capital to be able to springboard into the next thing. I was having a conversation yesterday with two people, actually, two different times. Like I said, I was raised a poor kid. My mom didn't graduate high school. Neither of my grandmothers graduated high school. My parents' first house was $20,000.
Your first
Okay.
house?
Their first house they purchased. That first house was a springboard. So they didn't have, gobs of money in the bank. We're talking
20 G's
about,
back then was some dough. I could tell you that right now. Just listening to that was probably that was probably a lot of money,
it,
right?
it,
20, grand in those at that time dollars, right? Because I can kind of remember when my mom and dad paid off their house, and it was like, to pay it off, it
mm-hmm,
was 8 grand. And I'm
mm-hmm,
going, wow, back then,
yep.
right?
And so if they wouldn't have been able to get a loan, they would have never had the opportunity for home ownership. Home ownership is one of the key sources of generational wealth
Mm,
development. And so that $20,000 house allowed them to purchase a $75,000 house.
mhm.
And then it allowed them to purchase, $130,000 house, and so on and so forth. And they've done that a few times over, because we know the anomaly that existed in 2007 to 2009 isn't the natural market of the housing or real estate in general generally appreciates.
Right. And I was in
So,
the real estate space, buying and selling and investing.
mhm. And so for individuals that don't have the organic or natural cash flow, or the ability to generate it in that amount of time, loans could be that gateway in setting them up for that next step in life, whether that's in home ownership or whether that's business ownership,
Yeah.
and looking at commercial properties and whatnot. If you look at Grand Rapids, we're based in the West Michigan area, the greater Grand Rapids, Michigan area. Um, the We all know who the wealthiest individuals are.
Yes, we do.
And we all know, if this weren't true, they wouldn't own as many of the largest buildings in Grand Rapids as they do, if this principle weren't true.
Mm.
But they own the Reserve, they own 200 Ottawa, they own 300 Ottawa, they own the old Peninsula Club. You know what I mean? Those
Sure.
types of things, that multiple buildings, because real estate is one of those tried and true investments. And when we're looking at wealth, especially, and wealth is different than riches. Riches come and go. Wealth is something that is generational, that you pass along.
Hmm.
That's a legacy. Whether that's legacy into a trust that gets donated to a whole bunch of great causes, um, or whether it's something that your family can use for generations to come. That those opportunities weren't there for me.
So you're
My
suggesting then that the leverageability of, and it's interesting just to kind of hear where the progression of, the conversation is going, right? So as I think about this, I can remember, now I was always kind of one toe into the Dave Ramsey camp, right?
Mhm.
Of, no debt, making sure that, that you're financing things. And I would listen to him, and I can tell you, there was a time where he saved my life, right? Because I, just had to knuckle down and pay stuff off, because, the amount that I was paying out was just getting out of hand. It was causing just too much stress. So that's where I would listen to him, and I would go off and pay off credit cards, cut them up, the whole thing. But then also I knew, and that served me. It served me very well when it came time to, when everything crashed around me. I just happened to be in a reasonable position to then package a whole bunch of real estate and sell them all, kind of a deal, because some were paid off. But then I also understood just from college the ability to leverage money, right? And then in the real estate game, they talk about that, right? If you can bring, let's say $1,000 and you can control a $10,000 property, if it appreciates, then your money has been leveraged well. Now you can add some zeros to that, right? If you have $100,000 and you can control $1 million property, and then that $1 million property, spools off enough cash where it then pays back whatever you've leveraged, maintains that, and then at a future time, that's the appreciation of capital approach, right? So I'm definitely down with that. So don't get me wrong, I'm down with that, but I just know too, I love what Mark Cuban once said. He says, the transactional value of cash cannot be understated. And I'm probably, misquoting him, but the transactional value of cash, been there, done that, right? When you can walk into a property, somebody's got to go get financing, and you've got cash from just, your operations or whatever, that you can now go in and say, I'd like that property. But I've also seen companies that are, that don't have the loans and stuff like that, the reserves, whether it's grant based or whether it's just something sitting there, and an opportunity comes and they can't take it. Because, like you said, it would take me so long to generate it. So I'm kind of vacillating between the two, right? So the argument on one hand is that for me on my side, I'm thinking about this. I'm saying, man, we cannot get relied on that. It's kind of like a drug that you're taking for pain. It temporarily takes care of the problem, but what happens? You get hooked. How many times we're already seeing it, right? Our superstars, our heroes dying because they got hooked on a pain reliever. Now let's take that into the financial space. If we get, and that's kind of my argument here, right? Is if we get used to that our bottom line, our statement of cash flows, when we look at it and we go, oh, hey, I got money, but it's great. It's money that's got to come back. You know what I mean? And now again, it's got to come back. And where are you going to bring it back from? This is my argument is that the operations are either going to bring that money back or not. Now, what happens if you can't pay it back? I got a very good friend that had a tremendous business, right? And she was in the barbecue space. Tremendous, just money hand over fist, right? She had very low overhead. And at some point, somebody talked her into taking some loans, right? Hey, take this loan. It's cheap money. Now, I understand, right? You look at it and go, well, cheap money. Cheap money means that it doesn't, it doesn't cost a lot, blah, blah, right? Well, the economy went to heck in a handbasket, right? It went to hell. And she, in between that time, had taken the cheap money and built a new building. Now, guess what? I got loans to pay. Now you're looking at whether or not the economy is bad. Not a lot of people are buying, and you're looking at your income. And you're saying, should I pay these payroll taxes? Should I pay these state taxes, or should I try to eat and pay my employees, pay my material costs, right? Cost of doing business. Should I do that and end up getting in a whole bunch of trouble? Right. And then, of course, that brand new building that looked like cheap money at that time ended up basically costing her the business. And she is not back yet. Now, my thinking, of course, I remember I had just gotten out of college and I was working for a electrical company, an electrician. And one of the first things I told him when I started thinking about what was happening around us, right? I said, look, the economy is going bad. Nobody's going to be, I said, you should take this back and put it in your basement. You get rid of thousands of dollars in overhead, right? And I says, you can get a little spot for your equipment. You know what I mean? And basically the equipment was his knowledge. some tools, but you just didn't need a building. And that would have saved, in my estimation, that would have saved the company a lot of money, right? And of course, you had to lay off employees, right? The non-essentials. And I says, but of course, sometimes, an entrepreneur can be hard-headed, right? And sometimes rightfully so. But I think was the difference between the company surviving that downturn and having to go, belly up in essence, right? So as we think about this and we say to ourselves, now, if you had the cash, you would have been paying from your loan to pay your rent, to pay your operations, but you still weren't generating cash flow from customers because there was no customers. So it's, in my estimation, a false dichotomy, right? I'm sorry for using the big words, guys, but this is just what happens to me when, I'm faced with these kind of things, right? You have a false sense of security. It's like, wow, last week I had a cold, and for the first I was like trying to, man, I'm gonna tough it out, and then not a cold but the flu, the pain from the flu, and it's like, well, give me some Motrin. But then eventually I had to stop taking those Motrin because I realized that they weren't helping me get better. They were just covering the pain. Now imagine people that, again, like I said earlier, that have the tougher pains. Then they get hooked. Same with the business. You get hooked on that money and it's not true money. The company is still headed toward going bust because you haven't done anything with the operations. Now, to that, how should we, John, when people are taking the loans, what should they be doing?
Absolutely. And
with that loan money?
You bring up some great things. And first, I want to go back. You had mentioned Dave Ramsey philosophy. And I don't know, 6-7 years ago, I had the privilege of going down to Franklin, Tennessee, where Dave has Ramsey Solutions. That's his whole enterprise. And I met Dave Ramsey and Christy Wright and Chris Hogan and even some of Dave's children who work for him. And his philosophy comes from his story. And early in his life, he actually his business went belly up. He went bankrupt. And so his philosophy comes from that experience. And so when we look at any situations, that's an extreme situation. And so it does cloud the way that I look at that situation. It tints the lenses in how I view money that is borrowed. And yes, a business needs to be sustainable long term. It needs to generate revenue to cover its expenses. However, there are times in business that you need capital to lean on. You need access to capital.
Sure.
Now, a business cannot, like you said, they can't use it as this prop that they believe is going to be there forever.
So they can't go buy a new car.
Yeah, this is a temporary thing. This is like getting a cast. Okay, my leg's broken. I'm going to get a cast. The cast isn't always going to be there. Sooner or later, I'm going to get the cast taken off, and the crutches are going to go away. I'm not to start walking on my own.
That's probably why they don't do straight. You notice they don't really do straight casts anymore. They try to give you a boot, something that's temporary, right? So that you're and they get you up right away.
Yep.
I noticed that unless your stuff is just crushed, right? That they give you some kind of compression boot so that you can kind of walk around because they don't want you to get too used to it. I remember when I got my cast off, my leg was about this big. And I'm telling you, that leg is not the same even to this day. It never got the muscle that and it was a cast from like way down on the toes all the way up. Right. But that's to your point. You can't rely on it. I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
So the first thing, whenever you do have to dig into capital, there has to be a plan set up.
So have a plan for
Have
how
a
you're going to
plan.
use the money that's really
Absolutely.
not yours. It's not from the operations of the business. Okay.
And you're only using it for necessary things. What happens is, it's kind of like our kids. I have this conversation, is that a need or is that a
Mm-hmm.
want?
Mm-hmm.
And a new building probably was not an essential need for that barbecue business. So it probably wasn't something that they should have invested in
Right.
at that point in their business. Now, if they had payroll, or if the economy if was in a place and they were bottling the barbecue sauce and they needed inventory and materials and supplies, whatever, to do that, then yes, the capital should have been used for those types of purposes. But we can't mistake using
Mm.
capital inappropriately. So it's kind of like this.
It brings up
If
a
you're
point. Before you go on, John, I know you're on the roll. That brings up a point. So using the money. So let's say you're taking a loan, you're getting a grant or taking a loan, right? Because I can argue the grant part, and we probably will get into this when it comes to time value of money, right? Or time, not time value of money, but what your time is worth, and whether or not the time you put into getting that grant was worth it. So if you're expanding operations, right? If you have a belief, and I want to kind of piggyback on what you said, having a plan to grow, maybe go into a different area of operation that will generate income for you, then that's a strategic use of this borrowed money. Is that your experience? Has do people typically get these loans and do that kind of work with them?
Some people do, and I'm going to take this back to the average consumer. Let's not even look at business owners. Let's just look at the average consumers. Many years ago, I started my career in banking, and people. I mean, you could take 120% value of your home out, you in a home equity line of
Mhm,
credit,
mhm.
and
I remember those
so
days.
people were doing that, and they were taking vacations.
Mm.
They were buying cars.
So loans for
So
vacations.
they're doing all of these things they should not have been doing, and they were being encouraged by the bankers because the bankers wanted to make money off the interest.
Mm.
They now A home equity line of credit is for the purpose of reinvesting that into your home.
Mhm, mhm.
So it's a whole lot different if a homeowner is taking out that home equity line of credit and putting a new roof on, or putting windows, or doing a remodel of a bathroom or a kitchen. That's a whole lot different than taking a vacation or buying a vehicle,
So
or
everybody, you guys are listening to this. So the HELOCs, right? That's the home equity loan, whatever, right?
line of
I
credit. Yep.
remember taking the HELOCs and buying whole buildings,
Mhm.
whole properties, right? And I often said that this may sound a little weird now. Again, so I understand both sides of it, right? Dave Ramsey camp, right? Because what I would typically do is like get all, fired up and go pay off my credit cards or something like that. So the HELOC loan, if you're starting to look at this, right, it was a certain percentage, even though it was tied to a property. Now, one of the things that I had to go into was the mindset. I love what Peter Diamandis talks about. Your mindset is everything. Do you have an abundance mindset? He talks about that constantly. And I'm going, yes, Peter. We're on Twitter going, I'm going, yes, right? What is the mindset behind that? So you take the money, and instead of buying the trips, and instead of saying, "Hey, look, I'm fly. Look at my wheels. Look at my spot." You're now saying, "Let me show you the building that I was just able to purchase that I now own." Now, key thing, I now own. That becomes an opportunity. Now, some people will argue, nope, get loans on everything. That way you can say bye-bye to them, right? And I guarantee you some of the heavier financiers out there are going to be going, nope, you get a loan for everything and run it as an expense to the business, et cetera, right? because it's cheap money. I can, we can go into the weeds on this forever. But if you are taking that money and leveraging it in a way for operations, for building up your business, right? And if that property that you had with the roof was a rental business and you put on that roof, now you get to write off some of it, right? Or you put on half a roof 1 year, put on half a roof, the next year, depending on what year you were into the laws. You're allowed then to take that and it becomes a expensible event. So now you're leveraging it right. You go and buy a piece of equipment that you have determined that your planning has determined trends or whatever it is that you're looking at to see if I can turn that over. That is good use of the money. But again, what did you see in the banking industry? That wasn't happening. And a lot of people got in trouble. Now with these grants during this pandemic, this is my argument here, that we could end up in a situation where, hey, I'm using this money to eat. I'm not using this money to expand the business, right? We're seeing people get, in trouble because they're lying, using PPP money, right? They're just lying.
Buying sports cars and
and then showing it on. Oh, don't get me started on that. But because it's there, it almost to me seems like an enticing carrot. Hey, you can get over your pain by taking this pill. No, you're going to get hooked, and potential bad outcomes can come. But when you look at the financing of your business through the operations via sales, right? Now you can say this is the true health. And this is where I've been getting to. If I look at my bottom line and I see a whole bunch of, it's muddied with loans, it's muddied with grants, then I'm going, it appears as if I'm doing all right. My balance sheet looks fine, but it's not fine. On the loans, they got to come back, even if they're small percentages. Right now, again, depending on what kind of business you're in, and this is, as you guys are listening to this, understand it depends on the business that you're in, right? For me, I didn't want to take anything simply because the business that I'm in, it just didn't make sense. I didn't have a whole bunch of employees, right? I use a lot of contract work. So in this particular case, it says, well, you know what? I can't justify it. But your situation might be different where you're saying, listen, this is what the prognostications have shown. Even though the stock market went down to like 18,000, it's back up to over 30. You know what I mean? If you could have weathered the storm, then maybe the loan situations, grant situations were then leverageable for you. But what I'm trying to say here is that human nature suggests that sometimes we do bad things with these loans, and then it ends up cracking our business. That's what I'm trying to get to. John, I'm sorry. Go ahead, John. I didn't mean to go into that little diatribe.
You're absolutely right, Randy. Loans are tools, and it's whether or not you're utilizing that tool to better your business. If I'm building a house, if I'm a builder and I'm building a house and I have a hammer, well, I also have a blueprint of what I'm building. That's with right. All the schematics and everything on there. So I know where I'm going. I know where to start. I don't start with the roof and work down. You start with the base of the building and work your way up. And we need to look at financing. We need to look at loans like that. This is not a permanent thing. This is a temporary thing. But once we get this money, what is the plan that we have in place that we're going to use those funds for, that I'm not going to be dependent, that I could pay that back and I'm not going to be dependent on those funds indefinitely. That's the key to this, whether that's personally, if you're looking at yourself as a consumer, or whether that's you looking at it as a business owner. Is this money necessary? You have to ask that question, and you're very right, because I think a lot of times we see these enticing offers, and we want to jump on them. It's kind of like this. Every year they have a huge sale on brand new vehicles when they come out with the next year models.
Mhm.
Well, if I don't need a brand new vehicle, why am I even looking at it? But we all know we've looked at them.
Yep. I
Um,
have to. Yep.
and we know as soon as we drive that
Zero
off the
percent
lot,
financing.
yeah, as soon as we drive that off the lot, it depreciated like 20%. And it's ridiculous because a car is a bad investment. A vehicle is a bad investment unless it's a work type vehicle that you
Sure.
need to,
Yeah.
to do your business. But it's the same thing when you're looking at a business loan. Um, will this bring returns? And will this put me in a position that I can weather this storm and I'm going to be stronger on the other side? And I'm not going to be dependent on these indefinitely. You always have to ask yourself, you can't go into this blind thinking, hey, this is going to solve my problems, and keep doing things the way you were doing them before. You have to have a plan on what's different. I'm looking at this, what's different? Do I need to acquire more contracts? What is it that I need to do so I don't end up in this situation again?
Mhm. Now that makes sense. So if you're looking at this loan, or let's say you're applying for the loan, and you say, hey, the loan is at 1, 2, 3, 4%, and you say, well, great. And then if your plan, your business plan, the new one that you may have just written up says that I believe there's going to be a 6% growth in my net incomes, or whatever, however you're doing your math. And this is one of the key things I think that, John, we talk about this a lot, off camera, about the how you're looking at your business, and that you have to look at how it is being run, and the money that's coming in, how it's being put in the different buckets, right? That makes sense. So you then can look at this and says, well, what I've shown that in the business I'm growing at X amount per percent. Now you ask yourself this question: what's preventing more growth? Well, marketing. Okay. And if it's kind of proven out, right, that if I put a little more money into marketing, it returns this. It just happens. Then you can say, well, how much does it happen? Well, it happens by 6%. Now you look at that loan and you go, okay, now I can take pieces of that loan and say, I'm going to grow my company because I have proven and it has shown that it will grow by 6% if I just had some money to do this.
Mhm. I
Now you're looking at it and going, okay, now the math starts working. And this is what oftentimes I tell the entrepreneurs that I teach. I said, listen, when we get to the areas where of break even, and you start getting into the areas of sales projection, and you start seeing the numbers move, why it is one of the best times. And they get frustrated because the numbers start, talking to them, and I don't know how to figure this out. And then once they figure it out, they go, wait a minute, this information here that the numbers just gave me now allows me to make very intelligent decisions. And that's one of the key parts, right? Because the numbers start moving, and you start saying, well, I'm going to break even on month 5. And if I just put some more marketing dollars into this, I can maybe break even at week 4. And that's with all of your expenses put in, your salary put in for yourself, all of these different things, right? So now that's information for you. And you go, wait a minute, if I now had a pool of money at 1%, 2% interest rates, if you will, now I know week or month 4, break even. Month 5, another outcome. Month 6, another outcome. Now that's when you can look at leveraging that money for good, for the good of your business.
it
Not the other way around, not to go on vacation and say, hey, look, business is healthy when it's not.
the other thing is this going to really help my business? I was coaching a business owner about a year ago, And I worked with her for several months, and she wanted to take out funds. She wanted to borrow funds to grow her business. The problem was she wasn't acquiring a contracts. She
Mm,
was relying on people just to connect with her to do her business, like word of mouth referrals and
mhm,
whatnot.
mhm, mhm.
Well, in life, you can't depend on something that's intangible like that. So, I had numerous sessions, and I assisted, and we need to make up contracts. We need to go to businesses and say, hey, can we use this as part of your incentive program
Mhm.
and whatnot? Um, but that was very uncomfortable because sales is very difficult for most of us
Sure.
to
Yeah.
do that. But I had to say, without acquiring contracts, then you will you we'd be placing a hardship on you by putting you in a loan product, because it's not going to solve your problem.
Mm,
It's going to give you access to capital, but you're not going to be able to sustain it because you don't have a plan and a system set up where you're bringing in consistent sales.
oh,
And
wow.
so
That's a big one.
we have to look at that as a business owner. Is this just something that I think is going to be the magic pill, or is this something that is going to give me that boost that I have a plan set up?
Mhm.
And I think that's the important thing that we need to look at. It's kind of like when you take out that home equity line, what are you going to use the line for?
Right. Right.
Well, I already have a plan. I'm going to replace my windows. My furnace is about to go out. It's 18 years old, so I'm going to replace the furnace. Yeah, you're investing back into it, and it's the same thing that you should be doing with your business. And you don't do it after you get the funds. You do it before, so strategically
Mm,
what
wow.
you're going to be using those funds for.
Yeah. And that's oftentimes hard for the entrepreneurs. That's why we want you guys, when you're listening to this, say to yourself, if I can show a plan, then you'll have it, even for your own, experiences. You can say, I know exactly what I'm going to do with that 10,000, 20,000 to turn it into 20, 30, and 40,000. Now, oftentimes that may be enough, right? And of course, in the banking experience, John, you might know, you look at some of those and go, yeah, that's not going to happen. I don't believe you. You got to show it, and it has to be compelling. Now, I do a lot of coaching for, people that are doing in the pitch contests and stuff like that, right? And we had talked about this on one of our other podcasts about, hey, that might be a financing opportunity. Go win a pitch contest. Have such a strong business, a model, or such a strong concept, or such a strong idea that you can now convince someone to say, that'll win. I believe that you'll be able to grow that business. Well, that becomes some of the same concepts, right? That you're putting down on paper. You're saying, this is, let me walk you to, and when I judge contests, this is what I would say. Walk me to your first dollars, if it was just a concept, or walk me to your next $1,000. And if they couldn't, they wouldn't win. But if they could say, oh, yeah, let me show you a systematic way. Now, we know sometimes it's just a guess, but at least if you could say, well, listen, this is what I found. I done all, and if you're in the digital space, listen to this, guys, young ladies, listen to this. I can see that the trend of this type of product service is on the up. It's going up by just major amounts, right? Online, let's say in the online space. And you can say, well, I know that if I grab the right keywords, now this is for the digital folks out there, then I know that if I grab the right keywords and then I'm winning at that, then maybe I can put up websites that have those keywords, and then I should get this much traffic to my websites. And if I get this much traffic, it is showing that my competitors have shown that they're able to get this many people that click on and buy my product. Now you can show that. Now you can go in and says, now I'm going to take this loan, and that's going to allow me to go off and buy these these clicks, if you will, right? I'm going to be able to go off and do this because I see the growth pattern. Some kind of plan, something that shows this is where I believe this money will leverage me, will take me. Now, in that particular case, now I'm arguing for absolutely, right?
Proof of concept. So your plan should have a proof of concept built in it. So has this something that has already been tested and isn't just a pie in the sky type of something that I think is going to work. So I'm gonna throw in 5,000, 10,000, 20, whatever. Or does this have a proof of concept that we can go back to and we could say, hey, we've seen this happen with other businesses. We believe if we implement this, and this is how we're going to strategically do it, you have to your plan has to be specific. If you're just going by a whim, um, you're you're doing your business injustice, and that's where business owners get in trouble with, whether it's a business loan or personal loan.
Now, let's talk about grants. All right, man, I tell you, I've been thinking about this a lot because I'm seeing so many people. I just don't think a business model built on grant getting is a wise one, right? And that's where when I saw all of these grants that were going around to these businesses, and don't get me wrong, some of the people out there need to take these grants, right? You need to get these grants because this is the thing that's going to keep your company going. But man, what I'm also finding is the frustration for people that were relying on that money and didn't get it. Now they're on the cusp of their business going bankrupt because there was a lot of money out there being dangled, a lot of promises being made, and these promises not coming to fruition for whatever reason, right? And I can get a little jaded when it comes to that. It's like you guys are lying to folks out there. Cut that out, right? You don't want to give them that money. And we talked a little bit about this off air. It's like I don't really think they want to give money in certain cases, and we don't have to get specific on cities or anything like that. But and I just says, man, there's a conflict of interest here. If your city is broke, why should they give that money, or why should they want to give that money, right? It's like watching you being broken. You have to loan out money. You're going, wait a minute, maybe I should grab some of that out of the till. That's what I kind of had an argument about. It's like, man, I don't think a lot of these people that are granting these funds really want to. I went by a sign the other day and they had like $350 million loaned or whatever. And I'm going, I don't know anybody that got any of that money personally, right? The small business owners, I don't know any one of them. So where did you loan that money? Just to be able to say, we did it. We got some in from the government and we loaned it all out. To who?
Mhm.
That's what I want to know, right?
And
And then, so my I say that to say, listen, what's being dangled in front of you, you have to kind of decide time that it's going to take to go through this, the anticipation, the stress, and all of that kind of stuff. Not having your if you don't have all of your numbers right, all that you're going to have to do. If you can't look at that and say, well, you know what, I'm going to look at this as a skill build exercise, make sure that I've learned to, put together statements of cash flows, balance sheets, and all that kind of stuff. But if you are just believing that that money is coming, you may be setting yourself up for failure, setting yourself up for, oh my gosh. And I'm seeing the depression that's happening when people are thinking that they got that money and it didn't come, right? And the business is the business has been out of business because of the cash flows and stuff like that, right? Nobody buying it, nobody going to the restaurant, if you will. And then they dangle that grant in front of you boy, that's like crack candy. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I want it. Yeah, well, here's 18 hoops you got to jump through, right? So if whoever is listening to this, if you're out there making those grants or putting those in front of folks, give people an opportunity, a true opportunity. Give them all the information. Don't hide things from them. Oh, by the way, you needed to be working 100% in your business. It's like, really? Or I saw one that was, oh, you have to have an employee. Really? Right now, do I have to have an employee or can I contract? No, have to have an employee. So I got to have somebody on the payroll that I can't afford to pay in order to get that grant. Come on. That's just unreasonable. And that's just my estimation, right? Why not have contract workers? Because so many people are earning a living being a contract worker. Temporary work, whatever it is, that strategic use of temporary workers and stuff like that sometimes is the difference between your business being successful and not successful because of all the expenses that you wipe out. But yet these grant makers are saying, oh no, this is a requirement. Gosh, it just burns me up, man. John, what are your thoughts on the, and you work in this space, so there's nothing wrong with being able to, without even saying names and stuff like that, being able to say, here's the proper way of going
Sure,
about that.
sure. I th- I think there's a couple different things going on here. I think the concept of grants is a good thing because it's the same thing with the loan. It's the shot in the arm, short term, but you still need a plan
Mm-hmm.
type of thing. Um, but it doesn't necessarily get to the right people. We're not. I think lawmakers and the people that are putting these things together um, don't understand business, and they're not looking at the right businesses, and these are the businesses that need it. And individuals and businesses are getting these things that should not be getting them,
Mm.
and so it hurts. It hurts grants. It hurts the perception of a grant. But I think grants are not. I do not believe that uh, your business should be set permanently on a system of grants.
Mm.
Now, I believe in
It's like
and
it's coming over to my side, everybody.
I've no I've shared and I've shared this publicly that the model of a nonprofit, the way that we see it today, will be dead in 20 years. You're seeing social enterprises, you're seeing B corporations now
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that have that aspect that's built into them. And the truth of the matter is, the generations that come after the baby boomers don't give in the same way
Right.
as previous generations gave. You have
Giving for the sake of giving.
they yep, we do it much differently than the generations that preceded us. So that whole model is going to have to change. That nonprofit, that organization that runs off of grants, they're going to have a revenue generating aspect built
Sure.
into
Yeah.
that business. And I think that a lot of nonprofits that don't do that, they will end up dying off because I feel like the generations that are coming up won't support that. They're what they are is they're intentional about the way that they spend money, but they don't give in the same way as generations past.
Right. You're talking about the goodwill model. And a lot of people have, I go over to a store here in Grand Rapids called Benefits Twice.
Mhm.
Right. And I like that store. You know, I go in there and I understand their mission. Right. And I say, well, okay, great. They are utilizing it to finance. I think it's in their particular case, it's a church activities. And I'm going, okay, I get behind that. Right. And I was literally talking with a young lady about her business. I says, a philanthropic, if you have a philanthropic bent, right? In other words, if you can show that, hey, we are not just taking your money, we are taking your money and we are giving X amount percentage wise to these worthy causes. then I think that when people say, I'll buy that, they have a better feeling about that. I mean, that's kind of not my personal feelings. That's actual facts. There, you can look this up. People feel better about giving and buying from companies that give back.
Think about if we've those that live in Grand Rapids, you've heard of war, the war chest, women at risk. A lot of times those women came from abusive, or they were part of the sex trade, the slave trade, the modern trade where women are trafficked for sexual purposes. And though in that store, you'll find things that are handmade by these women who have gotten out. They were rescued from that situation, and people love going into those types. Holland has another one. It's called the Bridge, and you'll find different things made from all over the world in that store. And it's that same model. People love going into those types of places and being intentional about the way they spend money. Our generation, the generations behind us, they just don't want to hand over every month that check to a nonprofit without there being some ROI, without that nonprofit being about something bigger. I know a guy who who has a nonprofit, and it's an international nonprofit. And he was over in Syria a few years ago, and they ended up, because of the conflict and everything, the war that was going on in Syria, they set up a factory to make sleeping bags. Well, a lot of people were displaced, so they were sleeping out in the open. A lot of people know it gets cold, very cold in Syria at nighttime, and they didn't have the proper insulation. So what they did was they took something that was a need, and they opened a factory, and they provided employment to people, and they were able to produce these things that were of a need, were of a benefit. And I think this is the way that not nonprofit social enterprise is going to go in.
So then that sounds like a better use of granting. And this is why when we started off this conversation, the original was, financing your organization through grants and loans, and why it could be a bad idea. And John and I were just going to argue it back and forth. Now I can see points each side. I've been in a position where I've used loans and leveraged it right. I've been in a position where I says, boy, I got to get out of this situation and pay them off. Right. And then now when, John had sent me a note saying, hey, you ever thought about taking out a loan for your business? And I said, I'm not muddy in the water. So now you're hearing us talk about that. And as we wrap it up, we're starting to now see that new models are coming into the marketplace. So you now have to look at it and ask yourself, with these new models that are coming into the marketplace that have certain components built in, whether it is the granting type situations built in, and who's going to be giving, you got to ask yourself competitively with what you have as an offer, is it going to stand up against what someone else has as an offer? We could take the Tom Shoes model. Tom Shoes took a lot of business from people. Why? Because his model, we give a pair away when you buy a pair.
And they're not the best. They're not the best. They're not the most comfortable, and they're not cheap.
And they have lasted, and they have grown, and they have a community of wild and rabid fans. I mean, so let's just think about that, right? Now we start off with, like I say, with the conversation about, should you be muddying your statements of cash flows or your balance sheet with getting loans? And John argued successfully that, well, there are times, if you have a plan, if you're leveraging them properly, that makes sense, right? And then I can say, well, we have to consider this. We got to remember, human nature suggests this. And then we went into the organizations, talking about organizations, that when you're giving these loans, understand that it's not going to look the businesses that you might want to and need to loan to aren't going to look like the traditional businesses. They might not have employees because we really can leverage and scale up a business without that. I mean, they may not have the same kind of things that the old businesses would have had, right? They're building things in a new way. We're building things on the scaffold of technology, right? And there are people that are building the technology. Now, this is not to say anything about those that say, hey, well, we're displacing workers. No, we're suggesting that sometimes in certain cases that you still have a worker, they just are working differently. They are now the contractors, right? They're
They're
paying
business
their own
owners. Yeah.
taxes. That's right.
They're,
Differently, instead of becoming an employee, we're still hiring people. Work still needs to get done. Work still needs to get done. And work is still getting done. So that company or that person that says, you know what, I want to be at home because guess what? The pandemic made me, because I have to watch my kids, all right, grandparents, I got to watch the kids now. And they say, I need to earn a couple of extra dollars. They're not going to be our employee. They don't want to be. It makes no sense. So are you saying we're not going to give them a grant now, or you're not going to give a grant to a company that could use that worker because they're not an employee? Makes no sense. Our business models have changed in a way that we need to be considering these companies that are lifestyle businesses, because sometimes you can have and make a great lifestyle out of your business model. This is all I'm trying to suggest here. I'm saying that, listen, we have to really look at, as the business owner, how you are utilizing that money that you might be thinking about. Show the plan, show the growth plan, how you're going to leverage it, pay it back, obviously, right? This is the work that John's into. And then you have to ask yourself, like John said, do I need it? Just because it's on sale, should I buy it? No. Just because the money is cheap, should you take it? Maybe not. All the work that you're going to put into it, all the stress that you're going to put into it to get the grant or the loan that has to be paid back, should you do it? That becomes the big idea. John, I don't know, man. I think we have argued a couple of good points, right, back and forth, and you guys are able to take a look at this, what we argued, and ask yourself questions now of your business going forward. Should you muddy the waters and take the loan? I can argue for it and against it, and I'm not a lawyer, right? And they make lawyers argue both sides of a case, right? When you're in training, ask yourself, does it make sense? Ask yourself, what are the operations going to bring back so I can pay it back? Otherwise, your company is going to still go bust. Ask yourself, can you keep your hands off of it and not
Mhm.
go on a trip? Right? I need this money. I'm stressed out. All right.
I
And then
need this money, right?
I need this money. I need to get out of here. Right. My kids are driving me nuts or whatever. But using the tools, using the plans will help you. John and I do this work all the time. If you need our help, just call us up, right? And we'll come in and help you think that part through, right? All the time. Both sides. We can argue both sides. We can say, well, okay, you want to take $25,000 from that company that's offering it? That's fine. Show the plan that shows the growth, the payback time, and all of that. Show how that is going to benefit your balance sheet, and we can help you and walk you through all that stuff if you want to. All right, John. I think we've done enough, man. I think we've argued some points. Is there anything that you want to leave the entrepreneurs with before we go?
No, this was a really fun session for me, Randy. I just want to say before you make decisions, any decisions, especially when it comes to capital, these are huge decisions that can affect your business long term. That you have to have a plan, you have to sit down and you have to think these things through. You can't run by the seat of your pants and think that these things are the savior to your business.
Mm.
You have to have something behind that, that's deeper, that's going to sustain your business long term. So I just ask people to You know, things change. We've seen that within the past year. This is a year like no other. But it
Mhm.
doesn't hurt to have a plan, and you can always pivot from that plan. But you need to have a plan in the first place. It's kind of like a budget, for the household. You need to know where money is going and how it's being spent before, um, you can start doing the things that aren't necessary. Before I go to the movies, before we go on vacation, or etc. etc. We need to know what are the really important things, and are we able to meet those obligations?
And there it is, guys. You heard it. Hey, again, if you like what you've heard and you made it to the end, thank you very much. We've got some free stuff that we're going to be giving out. I can't really go into it right now, but I think it's called Execute Like a Boss. Anyway, we'll get into that a little bit later. But we've got some stuff that we're going to be putting up on the website that is going to be downloadable for you for a period of time for free. And we want you guys to take this information and take a look at it and see how it can help improve your business. Hope this has been a good tip, trick, and you maybe got a couple of secrets from what we've been able to talk about today. In the meantime, we'll see you on the next video. Talk to you then.